Lohan finally getting some much needed character development, which is overall great to see. He's one of the very few outright villains in the story, but Sandrovich has chosen to be a lot more subtle when it came to Lohan, at least before we started seeing, the major red flags here, like Oma not wanting to cooperate with Lohan, Wulong's thoughts on Lohan, but even before that, something that I pointed out in an earlier video, like right when Lohan was a new character, I pointed out that Lohan's suit kinda looks like snakeskin, and it seems like that design is quite deliberate, as we'll get into when it comes to the actual chapter, which is called Lohan versus the Consecutors, which are the other clones of Wulong. And we get a recap of why Wulong wanted to create the other clones, which was to separate, of course, the tiger from him. And eventually the cloning process was a success, with Ryuki being the perfect clone of Wulong, and I say aka the dragon, and the other perfect clone of Tiger, which is Oma. But they were the only clones, because among the perfect clones we actually have the failed clones, the rejects, and this is Lohan who's doing all of the explaining here. And the Consecutors have a mix of the DNA between Tiger and Wulong. That's why for the most part they're failures, and that actually makes them closer siblings to Lohan, because, well, Lohan seems to indicate that he's more similar to them than Wulong, Ryuki, and Oma. So he's like, they are my little brothers, which is very interesting that Lohan refers to them this way, and you'll see why when it comes to information we have later on in the chapter. But we get the Consecutors' names. There are Consecutor number 6 and 7, and their name is literally Scarface and Lucky Boy. You can guess which one is which, really. But Lohan, he goes to further explain what's going on, because he goes to further characterize the Consecutors as a whole, including the ones that are right in front of him. And he says most of the Consecutors are actually pretty careless because they inherit some personality traits from Wulong himself. The same is true of Oma. The only real person who is different, although he also has these similarities to Wulong, is Ryuki. But they're so nonchalant that some of them don't even have names, and some actually take pretty simple names, actually, like the two Consecutors that are here in front of him. Scarface literally has a scar on his face. Lucky Boy, don't know where that comes from though. And Nico, he sort of starts adding in his comments, and it's like, oh yeah, you're the exception to this rule, because he called himself Luohan. Nico actually calls Luohan an attention whore. But after that, Lohan carries on giving us more of the backstory around these characters, and that when they were rejects, the previous head of the worm, Yan and Ji's father, decided to go and train them to be basically the private army of Wulong. So they received training from like a young age. We even get like a picture of them as babies doing this training. But after a while, and it seems like Yan's father sort of trained them first and then started telling Wulong about his plan later, but Wulong, he kind of feels bad and he says, nah, it's okay, you can just let him go. Which I think, again, some people might use this as to say, hey, Wulong isn't such a bad guy, but I think that is an incredibly bad way to look at this scenario, because think about it, these are his kids. Just imagine for a second if a parent were to do this, right? They were to say, hey, yo, run free, you little kids, y'all figure it out. Assuming, of course, they left as kids. That's kind of careless, if not something you would go to jail for in the real life. And not only in that hypothetical and technically underneath most laws on this planet, abandoning your kids or just saying, run free like they're a freaking bird. There's also the greater consequence of what actually happens to them later, which is something that is revealed Wulong's action here shows that, well, one, he didn't really give a damn about them, and so he's treating his kids recklessly, and it has led to a very fatal fate for them, which is what I'll unpack later on in this review, because there's a very big reveal at the end of this chapter. But hey, when Wulong says, hey, let him go, fry free, right, they all go basically, and their training was cancelled. Whatever training they were doing, cancelled. Some of them went to live normal lives, others kind of stayed around the worm but are not officially a part of the worm. Yeah, Lohan refers to them as like guests, right? They're lurking around basically. But the ones that have come to attack him are actually, you know, the guests of the worm. Now, this is a very important point just to highlight right now, because you will skip it and forget its implication. Lohan knows most of the status of the other Consecutors. That becomes key for the later point of the chapter, but we finally get to see them talk here, and he's like, hey, you kind of implying, Lohan, that we're gigolos or something like that. That is what Scarface says. But Lucky Boy is like, I'm gonna crush you because I hate you. So one of them is expressing very strong feelings here, and Lohan, he just tries to laugh it off. He's like, hey, look guys, it seems like it all makes sense now, because you guys are attacking me in like broad daylight. I didn't really see that coming. At least that's not a normal move Yan would use. Doing a frontal assault right now isn't really the smartest move. But it seems like because they are expressing that they personally hate Lohan, but because they are expressing their own personal hatred for Lohan, Yan sort of takes a back seat at least, or distances himself from this event. So turns out, because of their status in the worm organization, them not actually being worm members, and their personal vendetta, Yan kind of used that to his advantage. A similar play to what we saw from the Boyo group with how they sent Sakigake to the real championship tournament. But when Lohan makes this realization, we sort of cut to Yan, you know, sort of looking a little bit ominous, but they seem to be at a carnival, and it seems like they're going to see a samurai show of some sort, and Fulzon, he's there, he's like, oh yeah, Yan, the samurai show is gonna go on any moment now, you know, probably saying, hey, we should go see the show now. And Wulong has a wooden sword in his hand, you know, swinging it around, and he's like, yeah, Fu actually brought this for him, so he's kind of showing it off. You can tell that Wulong actually kind of likes using a sword. Although this is not the first time we've seen him use a sword before. He did use it against, of course, Gaio Mukaku. Most people will remember that when he sliced him in half. But Yan is like, hey, isn't that like the worst type of gift that anyone could buy you? Like really a wooden sword? But Wulong, you know, he's like a weeb, or he genuinely seems to like swords even if it's a wooden one. And he's just swinging it around, like while there's like people there. So Yan is like, okay, stop swinging it around. Let's chill out now, okay? I acknowledge the wooden sword. It's cool, whatever. But from that point, we just cut on over, because it seems like we were trying to catch up with the worm and where Wulong and what all of them are currently doing right now. But we're now back to the actual scene where Lohan and the Consecutors are at, and the Consecutors are charging in, running straight towards Lohan, it seems. And Lohan, he tries to negotiate himself out of this situation, and he's like, hey, look guys, let's settle down. I'm not your enemy here. I have no intention of harming you. Let's all calm down for a second. The Consecutors, they don't listen to him. They go straight for him. They even ignore Nico entirely, and Nico, he kind of sees that and he stays completely still, bro. And he's like, are you kidding me? Like, they're not even gonna bother with me, it seems. But even while they're sort of trying to strike or are attacking Lohan with their fists, right? Lohan is still trying to talk his way out of this. He's like, hey, aren't we all clothes? I'm sure we could all work this out. But no, they're actually going in coordination now, and they're doing a pretty effective attack against Lohan. One Consecutor is behind another, and they sort of use the one at the back, sort of uses the one at the front to block the view of his next attack, which turns out to be a high kick, and Lohan, he manages to block it with both of his arms raised up. But they use a similar strategy again. One Consecutors in front of another one, and this time their attack is to use a long kick on the ground to sort of throw off Lohan's balance, so he gets kicked on his left leg backwards, which causes him to basically fall on the floor, and after that he gets kicked again by another of the Consecutors, one that actually jumped up in the air while the other was kicking him to the ground on the floor. Seems like he kind of stomps on him, and then when he tries to stomp on him again, Lohan manages to move out of the way on time, avoiding that, and we see the ground, start to crack. So it's a very powerful second stomp. And then as he's rolling away, he gets kicked in the face, being sent flying back a bit, and Lohan not having a good time here, it seems. And this is actually pretty impressive because Lohan, remember, he's ahead of the worm. This man should be as strong as like Edward Wu, Nico, and all of these guys. He should be relative. So the fact that the Consecutors are doing so good is pretty impressive. And Nico, he's attesting to this as well. They have flawless coordination, it seems, and it seems to actually come from, of course, their upbringing. They're not only clones of one another, but they trained in the exact same environment, so they have a very good synchronization with each other. And even he says, yeah, Lohan, seems like it's gonna be a tough one, good luck, as he steps away, bro. I'm going to point out that Nico has done nothing for this alliance. Yes, this is a joke, this is funny, but if you think about it, he's done nothing but sit around and ask questions, and Lohan has been carrying this alliance since the beginning, and I'm sort of glad because I get to slander Nico a bit more for him doing nothing and being a bum. But Lohan is like, hey, look, why are you backing away slowly? I need backup. Like, what are you doing? What are you here for? What did I recruit you as? What is this? I'm not your lackey. But hey, Lohan is on his own for this one, and the Consecutors are kind of stands up. They're sort of jumping up and down. Seems like that's the regular type of stance that they take. But right after that, we get to see a very cool panel of Lohan, and he's finally getting some aura here. And we see 3 skulls show up at the back. Now, these are AI generated skulls, obviously, right? But what's interesting is that there are 3 of them. Now, I've speculated for a while that they are 3 connectors, but this also kind of lends to the idea as well, because we can sort of think of it as one would be the DNA of Tiger, the other one would be of Wulong, because he has both of their DNA. Since he's a Consecutor, we can assume that's what's happening. But the third one is where things get tricky. But as we see this little aura that he's getting here, the other Consecutors are saying, hey, you can't keep hiding the fact that you are pure evil, right? The Consecutors know something that Lohan has been trying to hide for a while, but for certain people, especially us at this point, he's been really bad at it. But Lohan's reply is like, hey, what are you waiting for? Talking about them attacking him. And he says, hey, we don't really have time to take this slow, because the security guards, they'll be here in like 3 minutes tops since this attack started, right? And since you're the ones who have actually started this, don't leave me hanging, since Lohan is saying he's playing along with their game, so implying he's holding back a lot here, right? There's a holding back of actual strength, but also his character as well, because if we look at the previous page of Lohan, sort of having his little aura moment with the 3 skulls, you can see on the ground itself, something is like seeping out. There's something leaking out, and the Consecutors say you can't hold it back. So again, lending to the idea that not only is that aura picture intentional, but it shows what Lohan's character truly is like. But after Lohan has said, hey, look, don't leave me hanging, one of the Consecutors, Scarface, is like, hey, was that a taunt? Pretty nice. That was a nice taunt. It is what it is. But as he's saying that, we see Lucky Boy just get absolutely destroyed. Like, we don't even see it happen so fast. And let me just correct myself real quick. He's actually saying nice try. So he knows that Lohan is trying to bait him, kinda, but that's not actually what's happening. He takes out Lucky Boy almost instantly, and we see, Scarface, he's a little surprised, but he gets hit by Lohan's elbow, so he was a pretty far distance away, and he just seemed to zap to their location. Sends both of them flying, right? Assuming he punched Lucky Boy and then elbowed Scarface, sends them flying, right? And Lohan's like, hey look, let's pick up the pace right now. And we see Lucky Boy and Scarface, they get up, they try to go for a coordinated attack, hitting Lohan from 2 angles. But Lohan, we see this panel, he's kind of having that Setsuna Hisoka moment, right? Where there's this sploosh, again, alluding to that unleashing of his nature per se there. As he's laughing, he just manages to hit both Scarface and Lucky Boy in the face. And it's a powerful attack because they just go to the ground, they get flipped over basically. And what's very interesting about this entire battle is that, and this alludes to the type of martial arts Lohan actually uses, which I have talked about a really long time ago. You can't really comprehend what's happening here. I don't know if you've actually noticed. It seems like Lohan is teleporting around, that's what it looks like. But as they're on the ground, we see Lohan stands up, and in the drafts he looks a lot more zesty, which is of course what I post on the video. And he's just enjoying himself here, because he's finally gotten a little bit of a taste of how it's like to be Shen Wulong. And he's like, man, I could have actually defended myself against that attack in his sleep, right? This is Shen Wulong's world, is what he's saying, in his ominous voice. And even says, even, his own fellow clones are ants by comparison. There's such a huge gap between them now. Which, unfortunately, I don't think it helps much to point that out, because they are pretty impressive, it seems like, on paper. But it would have been pretty good if we saw how they would do against other established characters outside of Lohan. And maybe that might happen in the future, but I think this display does far more to expose not necessarily how strong Lohan is, but his character as well, because we get a very big revelation in this chapter. Because the Consecutors are like, hey, don't call us your fellow clones. You are not like us at all, bro. You're literally trying to kill all of us Consecutors. Let's just hold it right there. Now, if you've made it all the way to this video, congrats. But you see where this comes in, why I said Wulong made a mistake. Because the only way these Consecutors can know about it is if they've seen the attempts done on their lives, and either the other Consecutors have actually survived attacks from Lohan or from Death Dealers specifically, or they know people who have died. This also explains how Lohan knows the status of most of the other Consecutors. It's coming together in this moment. There's a reason why Togita Oma had a bad feeling when it comes to working with Lohan, and this sort of does paint a picture for the alliance between Lohan and Nico. Everyone knows the backstab is gonna happen eventually, but sticking a bit more to the Oma point, they also reveal that you're the mastermind behind the attempts to get rid of these successors, Oma and Ryuki, which explains why Oma was in the inside, and that might also explain how Gaio Mokaku ended up getting information about Ryuki as a baby to go and steal him. Lohan may have been the man who has been playing sides and influencing the events of the series, at least pivotal events, right, for a long time now. And this is good to see. It's good to finally see how much influence, how much stake there is when it comes to Lohan as a character and his influence. How much of a manipulator he is, and how, once we expose this, how will he mesh with Nico? How will that backstab or betrayal actually go on for? Because everyone knows it's happening. Oma probably had a feeling that, yeah, Lohan is not a good guy. He was going to backstab them at some point. Lohan has no intention of leaving any of the clones alive after this. He's cleaning house, it seems. And I wonder if the hostility only extends to the clones. My guess is that he is Team Me, in terms of he is Team himself. Nico's probably going to be in a tough spot as well if he doesn't get Lohan first. Very good chapter for Lohan's character in my opinion. The fight itself, it was okay. I think it would have helped that we knew how strong the Consecutors were with more feats, more comparisons. But I would say this was a great chapter, elaborating on one of the villains of the story. And yeah, that's it. Don't forget to like and sub. And until next time, take it easy.